Your Creative Push just celebrated its 1-year anniversary. To help the show going into its 2nd year, you can fill out a brief survey by going to yourcreativepush.com/survey. It'll only take 5 minutes, and your opinions and comments will help to make the show better serve you moving forward. Again, that's yourcreativepush.com/survey, and thank you so much for your time. Your Creative Push, episode 192.
Don't let those voices hold you back. What are you being held back for? Because all we really have in this life is time. And what do you want to do with your time?
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Youngman Brown, and my guest today is Kate Shaw. Kate is a Melbourne-based artist who creates landscapes that are simultaneously sublime and toxic. Formed out of paint pours and collage techniques, her landscapes capture the transcendent beauty of nature. She has had many solo and group exhibitions, and currently her work is touring to museums throughout Asia as a part of the Asialink curated exhibition, Vertigo. And Kate, welcome to the show. I was wondering if you could start out by telling us a kind of a brief bio, kind of how you got to the point you are today in your artistic career.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a, how did you get to this point in life?
Right.
It's always like, well, I was 4 years old.
Right.
But I mean, yeah, I think the creative thing does, can come a lot from childhood, but just in terms of like a trajectory as a professional fine artist, I would say that I went to art school, so I did a BA in the early 90s. I traveled quite a bit. I went to the US for a while, came back, and probably the early 2000s, I really started painting again. So I was working 3 days a week teaching and then the rest of the time painting. And from about 2007 onwards, I've worked full-time as a professional artist. So that's the kind of timeline there of making it my full-time career. It's always about the opportunities you have, but in terms of having the time to do my work and the strategies I had it was really important to have that 3-day-a-week teaching job because it gave me money, and you can't really – there's nothing worse than just working full-time as a creative, but you've got no money and you're just always in a constant struggle. So having that good balance between income and time to do my work was good because then I was free to get the materials I needed to do whatever marketing I needed and that kind of thing. So that worked for me for a long time. And then when I got a gallery around 2006 that represented me and the shows were successful, as in sellout shows, it was just, again, weighing up that from that show, there was enough income that was comparable to the teaching job that allowed me to say, okay, I'll go full time. But it was still a leap of faith at that point because you have a sellout show 1 year and you don't really know if it's going to happen the next year. So luckily since then, it's each year continued to expand. So that brings me up to where I am today. So I'm currently working on an exhibition, a solo exhibition in Hong Kong for the end of March. And yeah, other little projects here and there, but that's my main focus right now.
I love it. Yeah, that whole teaching 3 days a week, I like that idea of kind of the transition into becoming a full-time creative person, because I think a lot of times people suggest to just cut off all the ties and take that leap of faith, but even if you do kind of taper off and kind of transition slowly into this thing that you want to do, it all, like you said, it always is going to be a leap of faith. It's just trying to make that leap a little bit more of like a padded landing,
Yeah, and just realistic, because there's nothing worse when you don't have the money to buy, like I said, in my case as an artist, the materials I want. But I've had friends that were comedians and, she was always struggling for money because she was trying to do that full time. And it was like, well, wait until, it has to kind of balance out where enough is coming to you. And you can just make it that quite simply, like economically, money, that you can then let go of the other things. Because if you don't have that stability and you're always worried about the basics, that's not good for creativity, You want to feel relaxed to be creative,
Absolutely, yeah. There's nothing worse than having all these kinds of other worries that you're always constantly thinking about going through your head. There's nothing that will stifle creativity more than that. You'll find yourself in artistic blocks. You'll find your work is just darker, or it's not fully representational of, your full output. So it is really important to have those bases covered.
And for me, like my teaching, I was working with Indigenous students in art and design. So I actually got a lot out of it. So if your part-time job can be something that actually it feeds into your work, like there's something relatable and a dialogue there that actually goes into your creativity. I mean, some people just prefer a mindless kind of job. Like my friend in the studio I work in, she's just gone for a job as a cleaner of aircrafts. And she's like, I just want something that's just mindless, like it doesn't take anything there. But the same way, like the teaching was challenging in some aspects, but incredibly rewarding. And it did really feed into my artwork, my art practice. So there's ways of negotiating that as well. I just think it's the time factor. Like for me, the 3-day-a-week job was kind of perfect because it was 2 days, full days in the studio for my practice. And then if I wanted to, say a Saturday, so 3 full days. And then one day you just need to do your life. You need to do your laundry and all that kind of business. You can't, there's always that maintenance of just the everyday that you need to fit in there as well. So,
sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that comes down to trusting yourself too, and really, for me personally, when I started, I'm a poker dealer, so whenever I first started dealing poker, I was like, this is great, and it really was. It would be this job, this, like you said, that kind of mindless job where you don't have to, you just go, you deal some cards, you make money, you go home, and you don't have to think about the job anymore. But at this point now, I'm like, but what is this doing for me? The mindlessness is starting to get to me. So now I'm looking forward to like what you had then, switching down to part-time so that at least I have more time to do this, like my creative passions, and finding a way to monetize it that way. So it's all about kind of trusting yourself and just like the way that you're feeling about something. Because if you do enjoy a mindless job, you do enjoy what you're doing, to make money, there's no reason that you should stop doing that just because you have this other passion.
No, not until because you're doing that mindless job for money, not until your creative passion is giving you enough income to balance it out so your life can keep it all. I mean, it sounds very mundane what I'm talking about, but the mundane things are actually really important for creativity.
Absolutely.
Because it just, you're relaxed. I mean, I was kind of thinking about getting new ideas or things like that. Like for me, I'm right near a Japanese bathhouse. So if I'm kind of struggling with ideas for a new show, I'll just go there and sit in the bath and then all the ideas come to me. So I find if the body is relaxed and the mind is relaxed, that's when creativity really opens up. And I'm a bit cosmic like that. I actually do think creative people have like a channeling capacity with a bigger energy in the universe or a bigger energy around us. And that's how we get to communicate to people on the other side of the world through our work, whatever it is. So tapping into that energy is a really important part of it for me. It sounds pretty trippy.
No, you just won the podcast. You just won. If this was a game show, you would have just won, because I completely agree. I think that I think all people are these. I think we all have this type of we're all this kind of antenna to something else, like that we are kind of a channel to something else, and that's why it's so like magical when you're able to get into that flow state where people talk about, and it's happened to me where it just feels like it's coming from somewhere else, and you just finish and you're like, what did I just do? Where did that come from? Who is that? You know what I mean? And oftentimes it's that balance of, is that me or is that something else?
Well, I love the origins of the word genius comes from, and I mean, I could be getting this a little bit wrong, but this is my understanding of it. So genius comes from a Roman word, geni, which is they would say the people that had, special skills or whatever had been touched by some god or whatever. So they're kind of like, they were channeling the energy, this stuff. So like you said, it's kind of not you, it's going through you. And I kind of gravitate to that idea. So it's without ego. if you know what I mean. It really is surrendering to a higher power. It is.
Yeah.
It's surrendering to a greater power than just ego. So that's how I work. And I do that through and that flow state to allow that. I really think whatever you can do to relax is the way to do it. I really believe in flow rather than push, which is really funnily enough because your podcast is push.
That's okay. It can be your creative flow for now.
It's creative flow. But yeah, I know, it's yeah, like today I'm going off camping for like 3 days just to be in the wilderness and completely not have any distractions from anything man-made around me and just get into that purely empty, present kind of state and just see what happens. I'll take some watercolor paper with me and I'll take my camera and some pigments or whatever, but I'll just basically see what happens. So I like doing things like that. It just kind of keeps it kind of real as well, because like I said, once you become a professional artist and there is an economic thing, there's all the invoices and there's all the money. Have they paid me? Has this gone in? Or, you know what I mean? There's all these other demands that have got really nothing to do with creativity. And that's something that I've really I've kind of struggled with over the last couple of years, because it's great, like being more successful, but then you have to keep up on top of all those things. And I'm just going to get someone to help me with that, basically. That's the easiest thing to do. It's like, I don't want to do that stuff anymore,
Right.
So I can focus more on that creative side of things. Yeah.
Well, that's the other thing, like we were talking about, trusting yourself and finding that balance, like when it's time to taper off from a full-time job to a part-time job and then to no job and just doing your creative thing. Same thing with that is, as you're doing more and more creative stuff and starting to make money out of that, there's so many things that come into factor that you didn't really anticipate. And all of that time does seem to get poured into that whole business part of it. So it is trusting yourself then when you're like, I'm not even creating anymore. I need to hire somebody and use this money towards, developing myself in that way.
So you kind of become a small business, and
right.
You don't really think, I want to be a writer, I want to be a painter, I want to be this. You're not really thinking, I'm also saying I want to be a small business. And so that's the thing that you kind of come up against with it. You're like, oh God, okay, I've got to figure all this out. But I think in that case, it's like, just don't try to do it all yourself. It's like you've focused on being a great creative in this thing, but it doesn't mean that you're a great accountant or and all these things. And so you need other people, basically, You
need other people or spend a lot of time learning how to do it yourself, which sometimes could be too much.
Yeah.
Let the people who love to do accounting be accountants.
Yeah, exactly. It's weighing up. I mean, one thing is, it's time and money. I mean, people, when we work for someone else, they're buying our time, that we could be doing something else with that time, because that's all we have in our lives is time, and then we don't have any time because we're dead.
Absolutely.
So it's just weighing up, okay, is this worth my time spent on this, or am I just worth paying someone else to do this and then my time is better spent doing something else? I mean, that's kind of how I have weighed it up in that regard. But that is definitely something to consider when you do get to be a full-time professional artist. You're like, oh my God, I'm my own boss and I'm my own this and that. And it can be full on.
Sure. But also, always keeping in mind the fact that, while all that time is fleeting and all this time has to go towards, all these different things related to the business aspects of it and stuff, and to the actual creation, so much you need to devote a certain amount of time to yourself, like you're doing this weekend. Yeah. I'm actually going this weekend to the Poconos, which is like the mountains. So it should be like a snowy little weekend where I can,
Beautiful.
And I think it's so important to, like you said before, to unplug from that technology, because that's really the way to like really plug into yourself, to plug into, that kind of connection we were talking about with like the universe or whatever you want to call it, and really like figure yourself out in that way. It's so important to get that connection, like to be maintained,
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, it's not about forcing creativity or forcing it. Like, it's not like sitting at your desk and going, okay, write, or sitting at the easel and go, okay, paint. It's like you got to kind of, so like I find walking really good and hiking because you walk through thoughts. Like as you're walking, the thoughts flow in your mind, and then gradually they kind of travel along with you and come in and out, and then you just kind of come to emptiness. And then when there's emptiness of the chatter in your mind, that's when the real creativity comes in, because it is actually coming from a bigger energy.
Right.
That's what I kind of believe. Like it's getting rid of the everyday chatter and letting a bigger voice come in. And also for me, deciding, well, is this good or not good? You know, with an artwork, I just really said, if I love it and think it's amazing and beautiful, then hopefully other people will too. That was my only barometer on it, you know. So I just tried to give up any fear or, I mean, obviously have criticism if you're like, no, that's terrible. Well, maybe it is. You know, you have to be the judge in the end, basically, with a work, whether or not it's finished or ready to get out there or whatever. And it's really, really kind of objectifying yourself in that and taking away what you want it to be and trying to be as objective as possible and seeing what it actually really is, you know?
Absolutely. Well, and I know that you, speaking of that, like with your art, you like to talk obviously about nature, and you're talking about going up into nature this coming weekend. So could you kind of expound upon what you want to say about nature with your art?
Yeah, well, I've done all different exhibitions, and when you read that bio before, I was like, oh God, it sounds a bit negative with some things, and some works. Like, so for example, I did a whole exhibition that was based on all the places in the world where nuclear testing, or not all the places, but I got the data from an institute in Switzerland called, I think it's Spiri Data. Anyway, it's all the longitude and latitude of when nuclear tests have taken place around the world. And I was shocked that there's been more than 3,000 nuclear bombs have been exploded on this planet already, which is like, I thought it was just a couple. Like, you know, I imagined that site at the nuclear flashpoint with things. So on one level, I'm kind of interested in what we're capable as human beings and how we interact with nature, and how, to me, like the nuclear explosion is like the ultimate of, like, you know, splitting atoms and rearranging mountains. Like in Pakistan, where one of these tests had occurred, they blew up a whole mountain. And kind of hilariously, when I'm Googling about the image, they'd then done a concrete replica of the mountain in the town. But I know, I was like, but so I was kind of interested in one way how we shape the natural world around us. But then on the other side, like my works from Iceland and the ones from Central Australia are really about our intrinsic connection with nature. So I guess in my work, and it's the conflict that we have as human beings as being intrinsically connected with nature and then being part so much of its destruction. So it's the conflict, the tension and conflict that we have in that, and trying not to be judgmental or preachy about that and the environment. I mean, because we all know, I mean, hopefully most people understand that climate change is real and it is happening and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really want to be that my work's preaching about that, because I think that that's for us and scientists and everyone to like work together on. Like it's not something that people need to be made aware of, because hopefully they are. But hopefully there's like an inspiration there that basically, why can't we look after nature? Because we love it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Rather than we should, or we won't survive if we don't have it, and all this kind of thing. It's like, no, it's amazing and it's beautiful, and we connect with it, and it's part of us. That's what's beautiful about Indigenous cultures, is that the land, the animals, the plants are all part of their kinship. They're their brothers and sisters, and they're quite like in Aboriginal culture, they quite literally are the same like skin name. So you're related to a kangaroo or, you know, the other plants around you, and it's your job to care for them. So it's just a different way of being in the world. And, so in some ways it's like wanting to, get people to connect a bit more.
I think you're totally right, and I think that's the way that humans have existed for a great percentage of
sustainability, essentially.
Right. And it's the respect, like the love and the understanding of how important the world is to us, how important the earth is to us, and to respect that. It's almost like, I don't want to say worship, but we kind of should. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
we should be so respectful for this amazing kind of existence we find ourselves in.
Sure. And I mean, that's all the emotional stuff, but on just a really pragmatic level is that out of that respect and connectivity and care and love is sustainability. And if it's sustainable, then we will continue and we will survive. But if it's short term and short sighted and just about taking what we need now and thinking it's unlimited resources and kind of going, oh, well, we're running out of oil. Let's go for coal seam gas. That'll be fine. And just there's no regard for the repercussions of that. Then we will get into some real problem areas because it's just it's all take and no give.
Right.
As human beings right now, we're just take. So that'll even out somehow. And that's the thing, that the direness of it all is that I do think that nature will, need to take back. And so that's where we're getting the, the tsunamis, the catastrophic natural events that are happening. I really do. I mean, they're part of, have you heard of the Anthropocene? So we've been through, I might have this wrong, but there was the Phyllocene, the Holocene, and now we're in the Anthropocene. So it's like when geologists look at rocks, they can tell what was happening at the Earth at that time to create that. So I think the previous one that we've just come out of was formed by, it's basically the carbon in the air, and it was the volcanoes and this and that in it. You can see it in the rock. So the one we're in now is the Anthropocene, and it's basically, you can see human beings in that rock. So we are having the biggest impact on the planet to change the geology of it, to change the weather patterns of it. So we actually are like this entity shaping the Earth right now. That's kind of scary because it's in, an unbalance with everything else that's here, but we're already in it. So yeah, we're in it.
No, absolutely. I think that, one of my favorite podcasters and comedians, Joe Rogan, he's talked about this before, where if you looked at the Earth as like an apple or something like that, and you just kind of look, if you're flying over, LA and you just look at it, it would look like a fungus, like a growth, and like you could try to like bring it down, but it's always like it keeps on growing. So like we're this like almost like bad thing for this organism, which is the apple, you know what I mean? And we're like in a very depressing way. It's like we're killing it. But do you have an answer then? Like what can we do? Because I think that so much of I think that almost everybody would agree with kind of what we're talking about and having this respect for nature, but I feel like we all feel like we're too small of a part of this kind of giant like kind of organism, like I was talking about, this like bacteria that's just like on this like forward momentum that you can't kind of stop. So like what do we do?
Well, there's a lot of practical stuff. I mean, say, for example, in Germany, like I think 70% of buildings have solar panels on the roof. They have like, a friend was saying there's like, you have 4 different types of rubbish bins. So that's all sorted out into recyclable stuff. So there's all that aspect of stuff. And that's kind of, that's where government's really important. Like you just can't have a government that denies climate change. You can't.
Right.
So voting for the people that will put those things in place is really, really important, because it's dangerous when, like, coal seam gas is really, really dangerous to this planet and to the people locally, and it's devastating because it just poisons the environment around it immediately and people. There's all those kinds of things, but it's just consciousness and living consciously in that kind of way. And in small ways, it is recycling, or it is, I mean, that's when it becomes more political, because it is individuals. What can we do on our own? We can't. We have to do it as a community. So it's being involved in all those communities that are doing that kind of stuff. And there would be, I'm sure, in Baltimore, you probably have recycling there. You probably have compost kind of stuff. So it's all those things that just lessen the load. The other thing, I mean, if you look at the three things that cause the most carbon dioxide on the planet, it's cars, industry, and cows. So actually just stop eating so much meat.
Wow, really?
Yeah. Cows are really problematic. And
I did not know
when
that.
you think about it, it's not that you can like eat. There's fish, chicken, who cares? I mean, do you know what I mean? Like if people just actually stopped eating so much red meat, that would create less demand, and that would be one thing. So there are things, and also don't support the companies like Nestle that are deforesting Indonesia to create palm oil. So also look for products in your supermarket that use palm oil, because they're killing all the jungles where all the orangutans live, all the white rhinos live, and also all these indigenous people. Like I was just in Bali recently. The clouds from the burning were coming over from the other island to where I was, and something like 1,500 people there, a lot of them children, had basically died from the smoke. And the government in Indonesia doesn't care because these are indigenous people. And it's just like, it's crazy shit. So that's happening on that level there. But the outcome is that it's all those Nestle products that are using that palm oil from that destruction to do it. So it's about support and not support. So that's what you can do as an individual, is be part of a bigger community and just don't buy the products because it's when you live in a consumerist society, you know, it is all based on that. But if you stop consuming, they'll be like, oh, we'll make another product. I mean, now everyone wants organic. So haven't you noticed everything's got organic labeled on it? Like the consumer will decide. And so that's in one sense of power I think we have when government aren't doing it. You know, not for us, but they're not doing anything. Yeah.
How about we do this? We'll, in our show notes page today, yourcreativepush.com/Kate Shaw, we'll link up a bunch of articles and stuff, that resources where if you're interested in you know, trying to become a little bit more mindful, that maybe you can make a couple small steps like this, like not buying Nestle, you know?
Yeah. I can also send you the link about the Anthropocene because it's really interesting. Yeah. There's an article from The Guardian that's, it's like, oh, whoa, because it's all those things of when that tsunami happens in Japan or the other one, they're talking about how the oil drilling that we're doing in the ocean is changing the plates of the earth because it's filling up with water, not oil. And if you just think of that on a basic level of lubrication, it is. It's like that lubrication for the plates isn't there. It's got water, and this is what scientists are saying. So there's all these things going on around us that are, interesting times.
Very interesting. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So again, we'll have that linked up. yourcreativepush.com/Kate Shaw. So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about your unique art style. How long did it take you to kind of develop? Because you have like a very, very beautiful and interesting style. This idea of paint pours and the collage techniques. How long did it kind of take you to figure that out? Like to figure out that was your kind of Kate Shaw style?
Yeah, it's really funny. I've got to say again, it just went from, it was more like it's so funny, paint flows. And it was more like I'd done a whole lot of stencil type works with airbrush. And then I started using some kind of collage pieces of paint. Then I visited Central Australia where there's amazing rock formations there, a bit like, kind of like Canyonlands in the States, but you might know Uluru or Katajujuta. Anyway, they're ancient, massive big rocks, like 7 kilometers wide. And you can see in that all the sedimentary layers over millions of years because of where they are located in the desert. And that, when I started looking at that sedimentary rock, that also was looking like what I was doing in the poured paint. So I kind of like the relationship. I was like, and it's not exactly an exact thing, but I was like, wow, those molecules in that paint reflected in the way that the sand and the dirt and things like that have dried. So there was this kind of connection between the materials that I was making. then it's kind of just developed from there. Then it moved on. So I'm in Iceland and looking at the lava flows and the icebergs there. And again, I could see the relationships between that and the paint. So, yeah, it's just kind of kept developing on. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful visual. And also, I could see how what you're saying with based on the videos that you've made a couple of videos too as well that kind of like have those like overlays of those two kind of juxtapositions. So when you developed that kind of style and from then on, was there any types of resistances that you experienced as far as like creating it or as far as like kind of finding an audience?
No, not really. No. I mean, you've really, in the beginning, so I had a show in what we call an artist run space. I don't know if you have them in the States. It's kind of like, so it's almost like a higher space in a way. So you rent it, but it's a gallery as well. And there's a gallery manager. So I did that. I was also kind of sending my work out to some galleries that I'd like to show with. And one of those galleries came along and loved the work. And then it kind of moved on from there. But just in terms of the opening night anyway, just with my network of people and like the prices of the work weren't very high at that stage. And people just responded and kind of loved it and went really well. So I haven't had resistance. I have because my technique is, I've invented it myself and I'm using resin and I've had to deal with, that doesn't work, that cracks, practical things. And that's kind of like a part of a process when you invent something that you're developing. I guess a writer doesn't have so much that problem, but any sculptor or inventor working in new materials, there'll always be a practical side of things of like, how does this stand up? How does this hang on the wall? How does this great idea? So it's all those aspects as well that you're working with along the journey with it.
Sure. And I think, I can actually relate to this a little bit. I make these music videos that like I write a story along with the beat of the music. However, in my mind, whenever I'm creating that, some things work because I am so close to the art. I'm so close to the song, to the writing that it makes sense in my mind. But then I show it to my wife or I show it to somebody else and they're like, I don't understand, like this transition doesn't make sense because they're not familiar with the song. They're not obsessed with the song enough to make a music video for it. You know what I mean? So I think that anytime that you are so close to something, it is important to, have those, like you said, you're inventing something. So it is important to keep pushing forward,
Yeah. And I mean, for me with a painting, if I've been working on it for a long time and I don't know what to do next, I just leave it and then come back the next day because there is something about fresh eyes, like just stopping, going away, doing something else. And when you come back, you've just got a new way of looking at it. You're not as involved and divested because you never want to get to that point where you work where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing. I mean, that's just the worst spot. And you don't want to be asking too many opinions at different stages. Like, what do you think? What do you think? Because then you're just giving all that away.
Yep.
And you actually know yourself the best. But I think a lot of times people are just looking for reassurance because they're afraid, but they actually know themselves if it's good or not good.
Sure.
And sometimes you might have put a lot of work into something and you just know it's not good. And then other times you put hardly any work into it, be like, this is genius.
Right.
And that's just the way it works, and you just have to be comfortable with that's how creativity can work sometimes.
Absolutely. And that's where it just comes in, just putting the time in.
Yeah, exactly.
And Kate, we appreciate your time. Before we let you go, it's time for the final push. And this is just where I ask you to reach to the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today. Just give them your best words of advice and really just push them to pursue their creative passions.
Oh, okay. Well, look, I would just say just do it. Don't think too much. Don't overthink it. Just do it however you can, whenever you can. Just do it.
Yeah, it's basically the best advice ever. It's don't overthink those things that are trying to hold you back, that are just in your head, that are kind of trying to sabotage you. And like we were talking about before, just be that kind of that antenna for whatever it is that's kind of calling to you, that thing that is in your head that wants to come out. Just let it come out and don't think about it.
And it's always good to think that, you know, I mean, this is what motivates me sometimes is, you know, you're going to die one day.
Really?
You will.
No.
That is it's an absolute certainty.
Kate.
So
No.
don't let those voices hold you back, because what are you being held back for? Because all we really have in this life is time. And, you know, what do you want to do with your time? That's it, you know?
Absolutely. Kate, thank you so much for coming on the show and for giving us that push today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And you can find Kate on her website, which is kateshaw.org, KATESHAW.org. On Instagram, she is Kate Shaw Art. We have all the links to everything we talked about today at yourcreativepush.com/Kate Shaw. Kate, thanks again.
All right, you're welcome.
Many thanks to Kate again for coming on the show. I know that her work has a lot to do with nature, but I really want to go back to this idea about you yourself going out into nature. Not just if you get stuck, not if you're kind of in a creative block, which it can be very helpful for, but also just to clear your head. Whether it's through meditation or, as we were talking about, going out into nature, it's so important to find a way to shut off all of those voices in your head. Those constant thought processes that are really, at the end of the day, just kind of clouding your creative potential. And not just the resistances that we talk about on the show all the time, the things that try to hold you back creatively, but just all of the everyday life stuff. The bills you have to pay, the things you have to cook for dinner, the politics of the world, things that you can't even directly control. All of those things are constantly swimming around in our heads, I know. But if you want to get to your best potential as a creative person, it's so important to turn those things off and to clear your head out. So I really do appreciate that idea of going out into nature. We talk about it a lot on the show. A lot of really talented people have suggested doing this, just going out and finding that way to kind of meditate and to be alone so that the ideas start to come naturally to you. And also just, you know, leaving the phone at home while you're doing that, or just turning it off, and really being able to unplug from technology, to unplug from all these things that are vying for our attention, and just be with you yourself. Like we said in the show, to be able to plug into yourself and plug into the universe, like we were talking about, the way to do that is to unplug from technology sometimes, to unplug from all those thought processes that I was talking about, all these things that are swimming around in your head, so that you can really connect to you, to yourself. At the end of the day, that's what's necessary in order to become your most pure creative self. So really think about that going into this weekend. Like I said, last weekend, I went up to the mountains and we did a nice 3-mile hike, my wife and our friends. It was cold, but it was so nice to be able to, like I said, unwind, unplug, no cell phone service, and just out in the great outdoors. For me, it's sometimes like working out. It's not a natural thing that I want to do, that I'm motivated to do, but I know that after it's done, I will feel so much better. Even if it's not the best day outside, take some time to go out and be with yourself. You owe it to yourself. And I think that after it's done, you will be refreshed and ready to go, kind of a clear mind as you go into your creative passion. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done. Thank you so much for listening, and we will be here for you on Monday if you need the push again. Have a wonderful, productive, relaxing weekend. I love you all, and we will see you next week. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.